It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Guaranteeing security for Ukraine. The UK Prime Minister sends a warning to allies about Russia and gathers military leaders in London.
A deal without anything behind it is something that Putin will breach. We know that because it's happened before, and I'm absolutely clear in my mind it will happen again.
It comes as defence firms call for funding support to ensure the UK can meet demands. And Prince William is in Estonia in a show of strength and unity with the countries which lie on the Russian border. Also tonight, a moment of hope amidst the destruction as Israel continues to bombard Gaza, returning to war with Hamas. The motor racing world pays tribute to one of Formula One's most colourful characters, a legend in the sport. Eddie Jordan dies, aged 76.
The sport will be poorer without him because of what he achieved and what he stood for, and just what a racer he was.
And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. The Prime Minister sent a warning to UK allies today. We must have a plan or Putin will breach any ceasefire. Sir Keir Starmer was meeting army chiefs to discuss the war in Ukraine. At the same time, Ukraine's president was addressing the European Union, encouraging a push towards peace. As the PM tries to create a peacekeeping force, we look at how the UK's defence industry would cope. More on that in a moment. But first, last night, at least 10 people, including children, were injured in a Russian drone strike on the Ukrainian city of Kropyvnytsky. The central Ukrainian city is located around 270 miles from Pokrovsk, a town near the front line where fighting continues, as the limited ceasefire only concerns targeting energy infrastructure and not a 30-day pause in fighting. Sky security and defence editor Deborah Haynes has tonight's first report.
The first public signs of a so-called coalition of the willing in action. Senior officers from more than 30 nations meeting in the UK to work up plans for an international force to help secure any ceasefire in Ukraine. The war zone mapped out. Britain's Prime Minister also in the room.
And now is the time to be doing this. We don't know what the outcome of any talks is going to be.
The UK and France want to build a reassurance force to deter further Russian attacks by land, sea and air if the fighting stops. But it's a race against time as Donald Trump pushes for Moscow and Kyiv to declare peace.
It is vitally important that we do that work because we know one thing for certain, which is a deal without anything behind it is something that Putin will breach. We know that because it's happened before, and I'm absolutely clear in my mind it will happen again.
The government has chosen to take a leading role in the creation of this coalition of the willing, but the greatest will in the world won't deter Russia without hard military power. Decades of defence cuts here means Britain could only muster a few thousand troops for Ukraine, supported by a handful of jets and even fewer warships. It's an important reality check for an operation that's being planned without direct US military support, given that the UK's limited capabilities are far greater than those of most European allies.
Important too to remember the UK is also a nuclear power, a status the Prime Minister chose to showcase this week as he boarded one of the Royal Navy's 4 nuclear-armed submarines. HMS Vanguard had just returned from a lengthy patrol. Filming on board is very rare and strictly controlled. It's why all sound was removed. But the fact this footage was released at all will doubtless catch Russia's attention.
Madam President.
Committed to working with Washington on peace plans, Ukraine's president beamed into a meeting of EU leaders with a warning about Vladimir Putin.
One moment they give the word, and a few hours later it means absolutely nothing. That's why we must keep pushing Russia toward peace together with you, of course, with the United States and with our partners. We can do this.
In Ukraine, Russian attacks still pound this country. More peace talks are planned. But no evidence yet of any desire by Moscow to cease fire. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
So how will the British defence industry cope with greater demands? Leading UK defence suppliers have long complained that outdated ethical standards hold back investment and are demanding change. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has been investigating.
The British Army call this the Jackal. A versatile vehicle favoured by special forces, it was developed and tested here in Devon and deployed on battlefields from Afghanistan to Ukraine.
It's got lateral head restraints, enhanced rock rollover protection system.
It's the sort of kit that British forces and their allies may be needing more of in an uncertain world. That presents an opportunity to the family firm that developed the Jackal. But finding investment and winning contracts can be a battle.
We have absolutely felt the disinterest from banks to invest in defence industry, which has been really hard to deal with over the last few years. We're hoping that the tide is beginning to change and that actually maybe some of the patriotic feelings that actually we need a defence industry, particularly right now, will help persuade the banks that actually investing in defence industries is good for UK growth.
Rethinking the ethics of investment is just one consequence of the government's decision to boost spending on Britain's declining defences.
The government wants its extra defence spending to benefit British equipment and British companies like this. The idea is that as national security is strengthened, the economy gets a boost too.
Defence spending as a share of GDP has fallen from over 7% in the 1950s to just 2.3% today. The Prime Minister has pledged to increase it to 2.5% by 2027. That's an extra £13 billion a year, but much of that is already committed to replacing our nuclear deterrent, rebuilding stockpiles and supporting Ukraine.
The whole idea is that when we're transmitting and receiving things, we don't want reflections off the walls, basically. So
some of that money will be spent not on trucks, but tech on the digital front line. Multi-billion-pound supplier Leonardo specialises in electronic warfare systems designed to counter and confuse the enemy. Their boss says the industry now needs a clear plan from government.
That forward view is critical. It allows us to invest, it allows us to put our own funding in, and we'll understand exactly what kind of capabilities what we want coming forward. So defence, industrial strategy, comprehensive spending review, all of these reviews coming together from government over the next 6 months will be critical in defining that future and ensuring we respond to it.
With the security outlook changing fast, the British defence industry's challenge is to keep up. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
Well, let's go live to the White House now, where President Trump was speaking a short time ago. David Blevins is there for us. And David, the US President once again raising the prospect of a minerals deal with Ukraine tonight.
Yes, Gillian, this has been a very big day in terms of Donald Trump's domestic agenda. Within the last hour, he has signed an executive order to begin the process of dismantling the Department of Education. But even that took a backseat to his foreign policy priority, which is, of course, Ukraine. He began his speech by updating his audience on developments there. He expressed his hope that there would be progress at the negotiations when they take place in Saudi Arabia, and told them he hoped to sign a minerals deal with Ukraine shortly. Let's hear what he had to say.
We spoke yesterday with, as you know, President Putin and President Zelensky, and we would love to see that come to an end, and I think we're doing pretty well in that regard. So hopefully we could save thousands of people a week from dying. That's what it's all about. They're dying so unnecessarily, and I believe we'll get it done. We'll see what happens, but I believe we'll get it done.
Now, just yesterday, the President's press secretary, Caroline Levitt, said they had moved on from the minerals deal, but it appears that rather than take that deal off the table, they're now hoping to add American investment in Ukrainian power plants into that deal. And in that, we see the transactional president writ large. But I think, as well as seeing Donald Trump's business capabilities in here, his attempt to recoup what he can from Ukraine for the aid that the United States provided during the war, we also see perhaps the possibility that he hopes by strengthening that deal to include both minerals and power, he may be providing Vladimir Zelensky with the security guarantees he has sought all along, because it's very clear that Donald Trump doesn't intend to go further than that in terms of any military personnel on the ground in Ukraine.
OK, David, thank you. Well, tomorrow we have a special report on the impact Donald Trump's tariffs are having on UK industry. Ed Conway, our economics and data editor, visits the last aluminium plant in the UK and tracks down one of the first British victims of Donald Trump's trade war.
Bad weather in the Atlantic has meant that they've been delayed, and that means that the additional cost, the additional duties, is about £3 million to us.
As world leaders continue to gather in a demonstration of strength, the Prince of Wales is in Estonia meeting with the President and promoting the strong history between the two countries. Sky's royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills reports from Tallinn.
You can see why they call it soft power. Prince William arriving to meet Estonia's President Karis. Smiles, always the preamble to the hard diplomacy. And then the cameras are ushered out. Because here the discussions elsewhere about a potential ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia are causing real anxiety. Estonia sharing a border with Russia and one of Ukraine's biggest supporters. Freedom School was founded in 2022 for some of the children among the 60,000 Ukrainian refugees who fled here. This message, one that William was so keen to get across, he repeated it several times.
What I love is the Ukrainian resilience is everywhere. You all are very smiling, very strong, and very kind of spirited people. And honestly, that comes across everywhere.
And also we have a small present for you.
The royal family's support for Ukraine isn't new, but the current situation gives added significance to everything he says and does.
Thank you very much. I like the Ukrainian colours.
It's felt like that whole concept of royal soft power has been more obvious in recent weeks, with the King and now Prince William right on the front line of those intense, high-stakes diplomatic discussions.
Drive around in one of the tanks.
On Friday, he'll meet UK troops based in Estonia, a visible sign of reassurance. Diplomatic discussions and talk around ceasefire has only added to the importance, presumably, of the troops that are based in Tapa.
Yeah, it's about an hour or so from the Russian border, but it's NATO's eastern flank. So this is NATO troops based in a NATO country, and we've worked together previously, and we work together, the UK and Estonia, training Ukrainian troops under Operation Interflex in the UK. So we're very close partners and fully interoperable.
The purpose of William's deployment here by the government is very clear: to show Estonia they firmly have the UK's support. And right now, it couldn't be more welcome. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News in Tallinn.
The Gaza Health Ministry says at least 85 Palestinians were killed in Israeli airstrikes last night. Israel's military mainly hit Khan Yunis in the south and Beit Lahir in the north. There is a new evacuation order for Bani Suhaila near Khan Yunis. It expands on the existing evacuation order for the edges of the territory issued on Tuesday after the ceasefire broke in the early hours of Tuesday morning. Tonight, the IDF has announced an additional ground operation in Rafah, and there is an ongoing ground operation in the Netzarim corridor, the key road that separates the north of Gaza from the south. Today, Hamas fired 3 rockets out of Gaza at Tel Aviv. One of them was intercepted and nobody was injured. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, reports from Jerusalem.
The days in Gaza, once again, are spent burying the dead. In a matter of seconds, In the darkness of last night, Alaa Abu Halal lost his wife, his son, and his unborn child. Their small tent gave them some shelter, but no protection. This morning, he laid into the ground all the close family that he had. Alaa is now alone in life, but not in grief. Not in Gaza, where everyone is mourning someone.
That the war returns, and at its start, the targets are the innocent, the pure, those who've barely seen the world. This is something heavy and difficult. You flee during war to keep your family and children safe, yet here he is, dead. They were all martyred.
This morning, elsewhere in Gaza and after another airstrike, another baby was pulled from the rubble. This time, alive. Her father, though, was killed.
When we asked people, they said she's a month old and she's been under the rubble. Since dawn, she's been screaming and falling silent from time to time until we were able to get her out a short while ago, and thank God she's safe.
Israel has expanded its ground operations to all areas of Gaza. The IDF has warned of further escalations. Israel has also prevented the entry of humanitarian aid for weeks. No food, no water, no fuel, no medicine is allowed in. That and the heavy airstrikes has pushed hospitals to breaking point. Hospitals that were already largely destroyed from 15.5 months of war. The British government has reiterated its opposition to Israel's actions and said that Israel must allow aid into Gaza immediately.
I could have been a little clearer in the House on Monday. Our position remains that Israel's actions in Gaza are a clear risk of breaching international humanitarian law.
Today, for the first time since Israel broke the ceasefire 3 days ago, Hamas fired rockets towards Tel Aviv. One was intercepted and 2 fell in open areas. No one was injured. Right now, the prospect of new ceasefire talks and the prospect of a new ceasefire are getting more remote every passing day. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Well, the Israeli ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Hotovely, has been speaking to Sky's Sophie Ridge about the breakdown of the ceasefire.
The phases included releasing hostages. It didn't happen. Hamas breached the agreement. It's so simple. There is nothing here not to understand.
Hamas released all of the hostages that were agreed in phase 1. And phase 2 has not started.
No, that wasn't the deal. Witkoff said, we will extend the ceasefire if Hamas will release hostages. I'm sure you remember that. And then that was the point where Hamas breached the agreement by not releasing the hostages. Basically, Hamas is not releasing hostages anymore. He's refusing to his part in the deal, and this is why Hamas breached the deal, and Israel has no other choice rather than putting pressure on a terror organization. We are not dealing with nice British government. We are dealing with terrorists. We are not dealing with civilized people. We are dealing with people that brutally murdered more than 2,000 Israelis throughout the years. So we're talking about people that don't care about the life of the hostages or the life of the Palestinians in Gaza. So if you want the suffer to finish, all we need to do, both of us, is to say Hamas must release all the 59 hostages. This is the only way out of the circle.
The Israeli ambassador to the UK there. The race to become the most powerful figure in sport reached the finish line today. Kirsty Coventry, Zimbabwe's sports minister, has made history as the first woman and the first African to be president of the International Olympic Committee, beating the UK's Lord Sebastian Coe in the process. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports now from Greece.
Mrs. Kirsty Coventry.
From double Olympic champion to president of the Olympic movement, the first from Africa and the first woman, Kirsty Coventry shattering another glass ceiling in sport.
This is not just a huge honor, but it is a reminder of my commitment to every single one of you, that I will lead this organization with so much pride, with the values at the core.
It was a resounding victory. unexpectedly seeing off all 6 rivals in the first round, with 49 of the 97 votes. A humiliating 3rd place for Sebastian Coe, with only 8 backers. Perhaps he was too disruptive, promoting prize money for medalists too divisive.
It's a disappointing result, but that's what happens when you go into elections. It's pretty clear that the athletes, and in particular female members, voted for her in very big numbers in the first round.
This seemed a win for the continuity candidate, closely aligned with the incumbent Thomas Bach.
After her historic victory, Kirsty Coventry now prepares to lead the Olympics in a turbulent world, with so many political, not just sporting challenges confronting the IOC.
Particularly with the next Summer Olympics in LA in 2028 and all the unpredictability of Donald Trump to deal with. But Coventry has been Zimbabwe's sports minister for 7 years.
I have been dealing with, let's say, difficult men in high positions since I was 20 years old. And my firm belief is that President Trump is a huge lover of sports.
Donald Trump has said transgender women should be banned from women's sport at the Olympics. Will you comply with him, or are you willing to stand up to him and say you won't be ordered around?
It's going to take communication. We're going to create a task force that's going to look at the transgender issue and the protection of the female category.
Big decisions facing Kirsty Coventry in the most prestigious and powerful position in sport.
Congratulations, well done.
Thank you.
Rob Harris, Sky News, Costa Navarino in Greece.
The former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has been cleared in an investigation into the SNP's finances. It comes on the day Peter Murrell, the SNP's former chief executive and Miss Sturgeon's estranged husband, appeared in court charged with embezzlement. The party's former treasurer, Colin Beattie, has also been cleared of any wrongdoing.
For almost 2 years, I have had this cloud of investigation hanging over me. I think it won't surprise anybody to hear me say that's not been an easy experience. So to reach this point today is obviously something I am relieved about. I've been trying to get on with my life, and I now intend to do that.
We have veterans who fought for our freedom still alive.
Protesters disrupted business in the House of Lords, throwing leaflets into the chamber from the public gallery today. Protesters from the anti-Lords group, Assemble, also held up banners and chanted before being escorted out. The government has responded, saying it remains committed to its manifesto pledge to reform the House of Lords. The Bank of England has voted to keep interest rates on hold at 4.5%. It had been cut from 4.75% in the last meeting of the bank's Monetary Policy Committee in February. The decision comes as the committee talked of growing economic uncertainty linked to President Trump's trade tariffs. Wildlife organisations are warning it's a race against time to clear debris from Britain's beaches created by the ship collision in the North Sea. An operation is underway to help remove the plastic pellets known as nurdles, which pose a risk to animals and the environment. From Norfolk, Sky Science correspondent Thomas Moore reports.
The stunning beaches of the North Norfolk coast, now on the front line of a pollution disaster. Every high tide is washing up plastic. Tiny pellets spilled in the collision between the tanker and container ship a little over a week ago. Some melted together by the intense fire into charred lumps.
This is the largest piece we've found so far. It's about the size of a tabletop or a car, and it's made of hundreds of thousands of plastic nurdles that have been fused together in the intensity of the fire. You can see how it's been blackened on top. And if you get close, there is that oily smell of asphalt or newly laid road. It is an environmental nightmare.
The coast and salt marshes are a globally significant hotspot for birds, some migrating, others breeding, all feeding.
You can see all these little lumps in the sand here.
And the plastic pellets or nurdles scattered on the sand look just like fish eggs.
The fear there is that birds will be coming along and potentially eating those. It's also the fact that as time goes on, those nurdles will degrade into smaller bits and they'll get into the food chain via plankton, invertebrates, and then work their way up. And indeed, we are part of the food chain as well.
The burnt hulk of the Solon is still just off the coast. Its owners say plastic spilled from a small number of containers and efforts are being made to contain and clean up a slick of pellets at sea. Environmental charity FIDRA, which tracks nurdle accumulations around the world, says the plastic industry needs to stop pellets causing pollution.
We think there's about roughly 400,000 tonnes of nurdles that escape and leak out of the plastic supply chain every year. And that, it's not just big, huge spills that these nurdles are getting into the environment. It's just the everyday handling of nurdles, because the plastic supply chain is so big and because these nurdles travel so many miles, they're leaking out of every step.
The local council is doing what it can to clean up the coast, even using vacuums to suck up at least some of the pellets. But it's a race against time. Higher tides are due in the next few days, and any plastic left on the beaches will be swept back out to sea, where it could take centuries to break up. Thomas Moore, Sky News, in Titchwell on the Norfolk coast.
A legend of Formula One, Eddie Jordan, was famed as a driver, as a team boss and as one of the most colourful characters in the paddock. But he was also known for discovering some of the biggest talents in the history of the sport, Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill amongst them. Eddie Jordan, known as EJ, has died at the age of 76 after being diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. Sky's Stephen Murphy reports now from Dublin.
He was the maverick 90s showman of Formula One, but Eddie Jordan was always so much more than just a former driver and team boss. This is how his former driver Martin Brundle remembers Eddie Jordan, larger than life.
Everybody loved him. He was, it was such a strong character to have around, great sense of humour. The sport will be poorer without him because of what he achieved and what he stood for, and just what a racer he was.
Born in Dublin in 1948, Eddie Jordan was brought up in Dartry and here in Bray, County Wicklow. He attended the Sing Street Christian Brothers School and initially wanted to be a priest before discovering kart racing. He won the Irish Championship in 1971, beginning a career as a driver and later owner. In 1991, he moved to F1 and founded his Jordan team. The 90s were his heyday. Jordan, the brash upstarts, won as much media attention as they did races, but EJ was also an astute manager of raw talent.
Jordan has continually and in the past can prove that its best results came from young drivers.
Among those, one Michael Schumacher, given his debut by EJ.
I was in Spa when he brought Schumacher in for the first time. In fact, spent some hours with him on an aeroplane thereafter. Eddie was a great people maker and quite a dandy in so many different ways.
250 races and 4 wins later, Eddie Jordan sold his team and became a well-respected F1 pundit, along with numerous commercial ventures. Last year, on his Formula for Success podcast, Eddie Jordan revealed a prostate and bladder cancer diagnosis.
Don't waste or put it off. Go and get tested, because in life you've got chances. And there is so much medical advice out there and so many things that you can do to extend your lifetime. Go and do it. Don't be stupid. Don't be shy.
Eddie Jordan passed away in the early hours in Cape Town, surrounded by family. In a statement, they said, EJ brought an abundance of charisma, energy and Irish charm everywhere he went. We all have a huge hole missing without his presence. Eddie Jordan is survived by his wife Marie and 4 children. His legacy in the world's top motorsport assured. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
Well, we can bring you some live pictures now from Hawaii. This is Kilauea volcano, about 200 miles south of Honolulu. Large lava fountains have reached up to 700 feet high today. The volcano began its current activity just before Christmas and has been off and on more than a dozen times since. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the UK director of the research group More in Common, Luke Trill, and the Labour peer and broadcaster Baroness Hazarika. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Financial Times. Its headline, Starmer has change of heart on plan for boots on the ground in Ukraine. We'll be right back with that and other stories. Do stay with us.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, her first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The Prime Minister has been highlighting the UK's nuclear deterrent before meeting senior military figures to discuss how to form a peacekeeping force for Ukraine. And breaking news tonight, France has confirmed it will host a summit, including Ukraine's president, on Thursday. Israel has increased its air attacks and its ground operations in Gaza following the breakdown of the ceasefire with Hamas. And tributes pour in for one of Formula One's most colourful characters, former team boss Eddie Jordan, who's died aged 76. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the UK director of the research group, More in Common, Luke Trill, and the Labour peer and broadcaster, Baroness Hazarika. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Financial Times reports that in the push for a peace deal with Russia, Sir Keir Starmer may adjust course and instead advocate for air and sea support in Ukraine rather than boots on the ground. The Eye hears the Prime Minister will warn Vladimir Putin of severe consequences if Russian forces attack British peacekeepers. The Times leads on Defence Secretary John Healey's claim that Britain has the power to do untold damage to Russia with its nuclear deterrent. The Mirror reports that David Norris is set to confess his involvement in the murder of the teenager Stephen Lawrence for the first time as he makes a bid for freedom. According to The Telegraph, the Office for Budget Responsibility has revised its forecast for economic growth from 2% to 1%. The Express blames the Prime Minister for council tax rises of 5% in some areas. While the Mail says the increase in council tax doesn't mean residents can expect better service from their refuse collectors. The Metro spotlights an effort to bring Britain's 100 worst perpetrators of violence against women and girls to justice. The Guardian leads with Ed Miliband's claim that the Tories betrayed the next generation on energy. And The Star carries an obscure joke about the sitcom Only Fools and Horses. Admission, I don't get it at all. And I like Only Fools and Horses. Anyway, we're joined tonight by Luke Trill and Aisha Hazarika. I defy you to get that headline.
I don't think anyone knows. I mean, we're all big fans, but none of us got it. We're all baffled by that.
We don't get it. Let's move to more serious issues. We start with the Financial Times and Ukraine. The headline there, Sir Keir Starmer has change of heart on plan for boots on the ground in Ukraine. And this is his... his speech today in the meeting with the military might in terms of the coalition of the willing, and the idea that the focus will be on help from the air and sea potentially rather than boots on the ground.
Yeah, this looks like it might be the start of quite a significant shift, because all of the rhetoric today has been around the idea of UK troops and troops from other areas, sort of policing a deal on the border. But the suggestion from the Financial Times and across other papers is that they're now exploring, is that actually going to be the RAF providing support? Is it going to be support from sea patrols as well? And I think that's probably a bit of a reflection of the fact that in trying to build up the coalition of the willing, I mean, it's been very clear that, Britain is supportive of it, and that's reflected in polling of the public as well. But in other countries, much more lukewarm about the idea of sending troops. And of course, Russia and Putin have said that is a red line for them. They will not accept European troops policing it. So perhaps it's a little bit bending to that geopolitical reality.
Aisha?
I think what's interesting about this is that you're seeing Keir Starmer really trying to keep the momentum going on in terms of the diplomatic efforts. And you have this coalition of the willing. You've got this meeting today with around sort of 51 countries and some really, tough talking, a very firm message to the Kremlin saying severe consequences if there's any breach of a ceasefire. But the key question is, even though there's a lot of talking, and I think Keir Starmer is recognised across the political spectrum and across geopolitics as having done a good job and he is playing a good leadership role on this. There are some things we still have to be honest about. There is still no ceasefire agreed. That has something that, even though Ukraine has moved on this, the Russians absolutely have not moved on this. It's been briefed out that, asked if the UK would confront Russia, Keir Starmer said this is why it would require a US component, because it needs to be clear to Putin there will be severe consequences. Well, we haven't got a guarantee from America yet that there will be a full military backstop. So there's still a lot of, known unknowns in the equation. But I do think what you are seeing is Keir Starmer very keen to make sure that this kind of momentum is continued, and he is very central to all of that.
But as you say, he's saying today that it's essential to be ready to act swiftly in the event of a ceasefire, because we haven't reached that point as yet. And the journey to that point has been a lot slower than perhaps we thought it might be, certainly when listening to President Trump, when, you know, he thought he could solve this in a day.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Trump's usual sort of bombast was, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to knock heads together, I'm going to sort this out. I think he's now realising in both Ukraine and the Middle East that this is much harder than simply doing that. And even that very limited ceasefire deal that it looked like he might have agreed with President Putin that Russia would at least stop targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. According to the Ukrainians, that is already being breached by Russia, and it just shows how hard any kind of lasting ceasefire will be. But of course, also, you know, is why Starmer is saying that there needs to be proper policing of any deal, because if you can't even get Putin to stick to that quite narrow ceasefire without some kind of guarantee, it's going to be hard. But I also thought it was interesting that if you look in the FT, that for the first time, it looks like Starmer also conceding that there isn't yet progress on Donald Trump agreeing to provide that security backstop. So again, I think as Aisha was saying, he's now, what you're getting from Starmer is he wants to keep this going, he wants to keep the momentum going. He's recognising they're going to have to start looking elsewhere.
And also reiterating, if we look at the eye, that Putin is definitely not to be trusted. We know for certain a deal without anything behind it is something Putin will breach.
And I think that's what's so hard for everybody who's part of this negotiation. You've got somebody, you've got an actor. I mean, look, you can argue that, you know, it's always hard to bring two warring sides to the table to negotiate. But what's so difficult about this in President Putin, it's pretty much agreed that, A, you probably aren't going to be able to trust him from the beginning. And, of course, he has broken promises time and time again. And there's a sort of consensus that it's not a case of if he breaches, if there is a ceasefire, if he breaches that, it's when he breaches that. So this makes it all the more difficult. So you've got a very, very difficult character and a very malign, malevolent character in President Putin. You also have a completely unreliable person in Donald Trump, you know, because in the last sort of 6 weeks, we've seen everything being ripped up in the world order as President Trump has really thrown his lot in with President Putin. I mean, there was even talk this week of them basically deciding, let's carve up Ukraine ourselves between us. So you've got two very unreliable people in the middle of all of this, with all the power and all the warfare and all the weapons. And that does make it really difficult. Although I think, you know, Keir Starmer, the Europeans, Macron, others are doing a really good job to kind of come together. But that is the reality. You've got two very, very difficult, unreliable men at the heart of this.
Which has forced European leaders together because of that and the unpredictability. Let's move to the economy here and the front page of the Daily Telegraph. The Office for Budget Responsibility halving the growth forecast. Not exactly what the Chancellor will want to hear.
No, and I don't think this is unexpected. I mean, we've seen other similar forecasts cutting back on the rate of UK growth. But I think given that this government, you remember when they were elected, they bet everything on growth. You know, growth was the central mission of the government. So this is undoubtedly going to be a blow. And what's going to be interesting is where does the blame for that go? Because we can see already from the Telegraph, you know, the Chancellor is going to point to the fact that the world has changed, in particular pointing to Donald Trump and the threat of tariffs. You know, for the government, they're going to want to pin as much of the blame for that revision on what's happening geopolitically. But on the flip side, you're already seeing this from the Conservatives with Mel Stride quoted here, you know, people are going to point to those tax rises in the autumn budget, in particular, that national insurance rise and small businesses in particular saying that we're finding this really difficult to manage and to cope with. That extra bill that you have put on us is forcing us to look and to cut back as well. So I think we're going to see a lot of back and forth on who's to blame for this revision over the next week.
Aisha, do you think it's going to stick, blaming the geopolitical situation, Trump and tariffs and the economic changes that we've seen recently?
Well, there is a lot of truth in that. I mean, I think everybody, whatever side of politics you're on, the world has been shaken over the last 6 weeks, ever since the Munich security gathering and that first phone call between Trump and Putin, when it became very, very clear that the world order, as we knew it, this post-war consensus, was very much shifting. There has been a consensus that we have absolutely got to up our defence spending and to do it really, really quickly. So I think that is a truth. It is also true that this government did inherit a very, very difficult, financial climate. But things are going to be really, really tough. It's been briefed out that, she doesn't want to do any new taxes. Now, there'll be some people, and particularly there's some people within the Labour movement, I hear this a lot from my colleagues saying, because the world has changed, maybe this is the time to break some of those rules and say, actually, we do need to put like 1p on income tax, call it a patriotic penny, whatever you want to say. But I think many people will also feel this country feels like it's really overtaxed at the moment and people are paying record levels of taxes and they don't feel like they're getting particularly great public services. And of course, that a lot of that is the legacy of the last Conservative government. But the thing that is really worrying is how deep are these spending cuts going to be, because this government, particularly a Labour government, does not want to be going down the austerity route. And there are so many, we talk a lot about defence at the moment, rightly so, but there's so many other parts of the state that need funding. You look at we just did a debate today in the House of Lords about the backlog in the court system. The prison system is creaking. We'll be talking about police later. Local government needs money, adult social care. So I think a lot of people will understand that the world has changed, but it is going to be tricky.
Aisha and Luke, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, the Metropolitan Police have launched a major initiative to track down perpetrators of violence against women and girls. We'll discuss that when we come back.
In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Thousands of Russians were drafted. For some, the reality of frontline warfare meant one thing: desertion.
I had a rush of adrenaline. It was a kind of treason.
But they did not escape on their own.
I help people to desert Russian army.
The stakes are high, but for some, there's no other option.
We keep going till Putin's regime is over.
Escaping Putin on Sky News.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open?
Stop.
This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Luke Trill and Aisha Hazarika. Aisha, let's start with you on this story, front page of the Metro. And this is about a new Met campaign or tactic to tackle what they're describing as the epidemic of violence against women and girls. What are they doing?
So they're doing quite a focused campaign to try and pick up 100 of the most dangerous predators in the capital, targeting women and girls, and they're doing sort of quite kind of intense focus tracking and policing and arresting. And Mark Rowley has written about this. Ironically, there was a big advert for the show Adolescence in the paper as well. So, I mean, there's quite a theme about violence against women at the moment. He argues that 1 in 12 women have been victims of violence by men, and there is an epidemic of violence against women and girls. And I think what's interesting about this is the Metropolitan Police has lost so much trust from women, particularly after the murder of Sarah Everard, but also the way Metropolitan Police officers, the disgusting behaviour after the deaths of Nicole Smallman and Biba Henry. There's a lot of mistrust with the Metropolitan Police. So I do welcome this from the Met. I think it is good that they're doing it, but they have got a long, long way to go.
And as we read, it's about proactivity. They don't want to wait for these men to carry out more offences.
Yeah, absolutely. What I think is quite interesting is that they have said that they're not going to wait for more offences, but also that they will use other offences as the way in to get these men off the street. So actually mimicking some of the tactics that we've seen used in things like targeting gangs, targeting terror offences, a very data-driven approach. As I say, not necessarily getting them on these specific crimes, but using the whole range of crimes available to get them in and get them off the streets.
So most dangerous will be tracked as well.
Yeah, but just one other point on that. I mean, there's these focus on these 100, but for a lot of women, just the levels of antisocial behaviour at the moment make it feel really unsafe to be out on the streets. I'm doing quite a lot of work in Lambeth, where I live, on this. There is so much work to be done. A lot of women and girls, and actually, you know, other people just don't feel safe on the streets. So there's a big piece of work to be done here. But it's good that they're talking about it finally.
OK, back to the Guardian, back to a bit of politics now. And the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, he's more or less throwing down the gauntlet to Conservatives after Kemi Badenoch's what's described as a sort of surrender, a net zero surrender. And he's saying that, you know, Labour's still up for the fight and shaming the Tories, if you like, Luke.
Yeah, I think it's the key line for me here is that the government is up for the fight over net zero. You know, we've had some briefings, some suggestions in recent months that maybe Number 10 is worried about the politics of climate change, that maybe they see this as an opening for Reform UK or for the Conservatives. What this suggests is actually that they think that the Conservatives have made a mistake here by ditching that 2050 target. And we do know that the public are broadly more likely to support that target than not. You know, this did place the Conservatives on the wrong side of public opinion. But you also had Reform a couple of weeks ago making those energy announcements, which to lots of people were quite baffling, actually. They didn't quite understand why they were targeting renewables. So clearly the government has decided that when it comes to net zero, that offence is the best form of defence, and recognised that, you know, and it's certainly true that for lots of Labour voters, people that backed Labour at the last election, tackling climate change was one of the reasons they did it, and they're expecting the government to deliver on it.
I mean, this comes after some sort of scepticism internally over Number 10's green credentials, as it were, doesn't it?
I mean, the net zero agenda and Ed Miliband, who for full disclosure was my old boss, they both, I mean, Ed Miliband's had a right kicking over all of this stuff. But he and the party does very much believe in this. And the one thing which I think is interesting about the Kemi Badenoch announcement, just be careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The Tories have done this before. I don't know if you remember, there was a by-election in Uxbridge, and it was like the whole thing became about ULEZ, which is about a clean air scheme in London. And it was like everyone just went kind of bananas about how terrible net zero was. And Labour didn't win that seat. But then Labour actually won that seat again. And as Luke said, lots of people, yes, they are worried about their bills and things, but they also sort of think kind of clean technology is the way forward.
We have run out of time, so sorry, must leave it there. Much more from you both at the top of the 11. Let's take a look at the weather for you now, though.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, today brought sunshine and the UK's highest temperature of the year so far, but tomorrow will bring changes. Most places will have a fine start tomorrow, but there'll be some rain in the west, with southwest England most at risk. It'll be breezy and mild for many, but some rural parts of the north will see a frost.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.